Today, my fiends, my friends, we get to experience a crippling horror that brought so much fear into the hearts of men and women alike. A terror that robs us of our sleep. A suffering so unthinkable that some would even dare wish it upon their worst enemy. Marriage. As an unlicensed psychologist who's had his share giving advice on how to make a murder look like a suicide, how a troubled couple can overcome their personal issues and finding a better way to resolve their differences peacefully and pursue their lives as a happy couple, and also discuss the insurance money too, they say marriage is a beautiful thing that tends to have its scrapes and bumps down the road. For some that may be true. The joys of a miserable dull life, or one's idea of living a little, resorts to a small porn stash and a toy hidden away in the back of someone's drawer. And then there are the personal favorites. The marriages that don't seem to work out that well. Not the hilarious moment when two people are realizing the miserable reality of their fueled fantasy when marrying that Prince Charming or that trophy wife. Oh no, I'm talking about the marriages that are on the brink of creating a beautiful horror that should be added to my collection of murder and macabre. Of course, we've had a wife who kinda got carried away with them chocolates, and the arrogant magician who put a little too much trust into his wife. But today's vile treat, my friends, is quite the horror story when it comes to a woman who tried to find fulfillment within her sad life by throwing herself into a marriage, just to escape a life of dying off as some loner. Eleanor Burdine, a woman who was once married to Arthur Burdine for 3 years. No kids, no pets, just a loving couple to the outside of that huge mansion home she lived in. But on the inside was a different story, a world that was carefully hidden away behind the charm and plastic smiles. That, my friends, is today's horror story. When Eleanor first met Arthur, sure, he was handsome, kind, well-spoken, a gentleman in his own way. And of course he was madly in love with her, and wasted no time in asking Eleanor's hand in marriage. But Eleanor did not share the same feelings about Arthur. She never loved him, personally felt that a woman like her could do better, but found no man that could meet up to her standards. And the only reasons why she agreed to be Arthur's wife was out of desperation, and the fear that there would come a moment when she's too old for marriage. Some say this is where it all began, but Eleanor believes that it all began after the boring honeymoon, when she first saw the family home that Arthur had put a down payment on. It was unlike anything she expected. Huge, aged, and furnished. More like over-furnished. Every room literally packed with useless antiques and extra furniture, or whatever nauseating dust catcher that was never sold off nor thrown away. Eleanor immediately found the house repulsive, but Arthur fell in love with it. Even though Eleanor couldn't understand how Arthur was going to be able to cover the payments on the house with what he was making at work, it was like a concern that didn't matter to Arthur. He bought that house out of selfish impulse. If Eleanor could describe hell, it would definitely be Arthur's dream home, but like the good wife that she is, Eleanor caved in, kept her mouth shut, and agreed with her husband. Yes, Arthur, it's a beautiful home, and it's so perfect that she too doesn't want anything to change. So I guess Eleanor doesn't fancy the mansion home. Well, after settling in, getting that normal routine going, doing those wifely duties while Arthur's away at work, trying to make enough to cover the next payment, maybe a little rearranging shall lighten the place up a bit, ease the tension. You know what they say, buy a woman a house, she'll make it into a home. But I guess Arthur finds that rubbish. Something that Eleanor learned one day when he came home after a long day at work. He got himself into a heated tantrum when finding the furniture being moved because of how Eleanor wanted to make it look better. What in God's name is the matter with this woman? The house is already perfect. Why does she need to move the furniture? Who even told her to do such a thing? Dense woman, when will she learn that there's a place for everything and everything in its place? Oh, but that was just the start. You see, as time went on, Eleanor began to feel the pressure over Arthur's obsession with neatness, his tantrums and verbal abuse. It had only gotten worse. Every day after work, Arthur would check his drawers, making sure that every piece of clothing article is in their precise arrangement. Just about every laundry day, when Eleanor would put away her husband's clothing, she would be scolded when mistakenly placing a clothing item in its wrong place, and if it's not folded to his liking. How many times must Arthur tell this woman? The shorts go on the left of the drawer, folded in half, buttons facing up, the socks on the right, toes facing the left, the undershirts go in the middle, sleeves folded inward. Arthur Bernstein, my friends, a fiend for neatness, and that pressure building up within Eleanor when not passing one of her husband's white glove inspections. If Eleanor wasn't so lazy, there wouldn't be any dust showing on this finger. Almost every moment of the day, Eleanor would endure through one of Arthur's tantrums and verbal barrage of being criticized and insulted. Her sloppy way of folding the napkins and improper way of setting the table. The utensils are placed on the left, the drinking cup on the right. How can she not know this? Sloppy, lazy, disorganized, incompetent, just about all day Arthur works to pay off this dream home, and it's downright sad and disgraceful to see his wife showing no pride, no passion, nor any love for their home. She can't even do the simple basics of making sure that there's no dust on this table. So it seems like Eleanor is kind of struggling in this marriage. So Arthur, being the perfect husband that he is, decided to help his wife by giving a demonstration on how to be neat and organized when having her come down to the basement and show his wife what he's been working on. Seeing how Arthur's luck paid off when receiving a promotion at work, decided to reward himself by building a workshop in the basement with the extra money he'd been making. Of course, he could treat Eleanor to a fancy dinner or give her enough money to spoil herself a bit, but what would a lazy freeloader do with the money? She can't even maintain this house on her own. First off, this is Arthur's workshop. It has every gadget and tool available, meaning that there should be no reason for Eleanor to be down here. Now, as you can see, every tool, every item, all the way down to the screws, nuts, and bolts and nail, are in their specific place, shelved, labeled, filed, sorted by length, diameter, organized, and neatness, the fundamentals of success, and what's making this a happy home. By the end of the second year, Arthur and his perverted need for neatness was driving Eleanor to just drop everything and leave. When he started using the checklists, his insufferable tantrum in finding that Eleanor had forgotten to check off the can of tomato soup she used, and dehumanize her for not filling in the empty space. But if Eleanor leaves, where will she go? She has no family, no friends, no money for herself, no job. It felt like she was stuck in this fucking nightmare. But how much can she tolerate? Endure? How worse can it get? Eleanor clenching her fist when Arthur would scold her for not checking off the 2 aspirin tablets she used. An inner rage that began to develop when hearing Arthur criticizing her for not making the efforts on storing the pots and pans in their proper place. Horrible thoughts when failing to meet Arthur's expectations of hanging her clothes the right way. Hangers should hook over the rod, all facing front, clothes hanging the same way, button side facing left. Eleanor, you lazy dullard. Undies to the right, stockings in the small box, sweaters to the left, blouses in the middle. Eleanor, for God's sakes, why are the black shoes being shelved with the brown shoes? Brown shoes go on top, black shoes go on the bottom. Eleanor, the magazine, why is it upside down in the stand? Tiles up, covers out, stop being a lazy idiot and do it the right way. Oh, my friends, a valuable lesson in life. When you start putting too much expectations and demands on someone, pushing and pushing and pushing, never underestimate the human will to avoid being pushed, to escape the hell that is being inflicted upon them. It's just a matter of time before human nature takes its course. Eleanor Bernstein, a woman who's now on edge, a powder keg that's bound to blow, and it only took a falling picture frame before everything quickly spiraled out of control. Any minute now, Arthur will be coming home. The desperation to avoid another one of his outbursts, quickly rushing down the basement to grab a nail from one of the jars that lined the shelves. Just one nail. Surely Arthur won't notice a nail missing. There's no way he can notice. But Eleanor, being in such a hurry, her carelessness had caused the glass jar to fall. The horror of hearing glass shattering, thousands of nails being scattered all over the floor, and the tears and sobbing when hearing her husband coming through the front door. the harsh tone in his voice when demanding what happened to the picture frame, wasting no time to rush down the stairs. What the hell is Eleanor doing in Arthur's workshop? Did he not tell her to stay out of his workshop? And not only did her clumsiness cause the picture frame to fall and break, but she decides to come down here for a nail and break one of the jars. How sloppy can you get? Sloppy, lazy, disorganized, chaos-loving, dim-witted woman who can't do anything right. She can't do anything neat. She can't. She just can't. She just can't do anything neat. And I guess that was the moment when Eleanor finally snapped. Everything went red. Arthur's screaming voice turned into muffling noises. Last thing Eleanor remembered was grabbing something from Arthur's shelf. Not sure if he was yelling at Eleanor or screaming out of fear, but either way, Eleanor was going to fix everything. Well, my friends, after 3 long years, Eleanor Burdine finally got it right on being neat and organized. You see, when Eleanor called the authorities the following morning, not only were the authorities shocked to find that there was not a speck of blood anywhere on the floor, nor the murder weapon, which was an axe, but in all their years, they've never seen anyone show this much effort in being neat and organized after a murder, besides a pile of nails, bolts, and screws on the floor. You see, after Eleanor came to and found Arthur's corpse on the floor, she knew that the authorities were going to come over and help fix the situation. She just couldn't have the authorities come over and find Arthur's body carelessly left on the floor, which is why she emptied every jar and filled them with specific parts of her dead husband. Hopefully the authorities would appreciate to find Arthur organized, filed, and properly labeled. And you can imagine the happiness Eleanor felt when the officer complimented her over the neat job she did. Welcome, my friends, for I have taken you to the gates of hell. Viva Las Vegas, baby! You know, after a few stories of venturing into the world of darkness and entertaining you with society's terrible habit of enforcing censorship, and knowing how things are going to get more interesting, I thought, why not relax a bit? Why not ease the screaming chaos with a white Russian drink? And what better way to kick back and have some fun than to go to Satan's playground, a pastor's paradise? Relax. Enjoy the beautiful scenery. Viva Las Vegas. Take thy hand, my children, and grab yourself a drink, and let Mickey welcome you into a wonderful world of sin, strippers, and gambling, humanity at its finest. Here in this colorful world, my friends, we have so much to offer, even a collection of stories that will bring the most popular horror YouTubers to incredible shame. Imagine the horror when people uncover my own special collection of stories that are kept within Las Vegas. A lot of fond memories. But today, my friends, we're going to focus on one story that stands out on its own. A unique pair of professional gamblers with their own special personality. These two men who have rightfully earned their reputation and have had their names etched within the history of Las Vegas. Introduction: Gus Forney and Lou Krebs. And for years they've known about each other's success, and yet they refuse to share the same table. They even refuse to even acknowledge each other's existence. An intense competition between these two men. Two personalities, two inflated egos that are driven to the edge by this inner drive to be on the top, to see who's the best in Las Vegas, secretly trying to sabotage each other's reputation. A brewing hate that resulted with these men using cheap and underhanded tactics to ruin their livelihoods and personal lives, such as a wife receiving photographs of her husband having a little too much fun with the beautiful women in Vegas, and someone who's currently under investigation under the suspicion of using company money for these trips in Vegas. If you're looking for a moral to this story, well, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas and should stay in Vegas. But I guess with this story, here I am breaking the rules again. But for me, I'm more interested in the fact that these two men have finally decided to settle their differences within an exclusive event. But not in a rational way. A lot of money went into this private event. A lot of strings were pulled. You see, two men with two massive egos in one hotel room. can create one hell of a story. That's just too hard to keep within Vegas. An unremitting horror that's worth putting on my channel. One thing that obviously stands out in this room are two men who are so convinced that Las Vegas is not big enough for the both of them, that it's become an obsession with these two to drive the other one out of the town. Yes, both Gus and Lou had thought of settling their dispute with a game of cards. But the obsession to drive each other out of their town, only resorted with both men using a simpler and quicker method of settling their dispute, and Lou giving Gus his own deck of cards to shuffle with, seeing how Gus likes to cheat with his own deck. So the deal is, whoever picks the lowest card from the deck loses, and can get the fuck out of Las Vegas and never come back again. That's right, in this private game, reputation is on the line. Both men have managed to convince several casino owners with a decent amount of money to an agreement that whoever loses at whatever game they choose will be blacklisted as a cheater and is no longer allowed to gamble within any of the Las Vegas establishments. And I guess the odds were on Lou's side after picking an ace of diamonds from the deck. But not all was lost. There's still 3 aces left in the deck. The odds were 16-1, and Gus picking an ace of clubs from the deck. Lucky motherfucker. More like a cheat. Lou is not surprised that he would be dealing with a cheat who can't even play an honest game. Don't know how Gus did it. It's amazing he made it this far in Vegas without people catching on to his bullshit. But Lou, knowing a better method in settling this dispute, 2 egos that are too big for this room, too big for Vegas, and let's cut the chase and admit the fact that they're even too big for the world itself. That's when Lou demanded for Gus to grab his revolver, cause they're gonna cut the bullshit and settle this like men, with a game of Russian roulette. Russian roulette. 1 6-chamber revolver. 1 bullet. 2 idiots taking turns in a sequence. And Gus giving Lou the firearm to load the bullet and spin the chamber, seeing how Lou likes to bitch about people cheating when the odds are against him. I guess the honest gambler ain't gonna be doing much bitching when Lady Luck is not on his side tonight. And everyone knowing whose balls hang lower between the two, that's why Gus decided to have the first turn. The odds were now 5-1. 5-1. It's easier to pull the trigger when knowing how the odds are going to be lower for Lou. 4-1 for Lou. Let's put that honest gambler to the test, huh? Let's see how devoted he is to this fake image of being a respectful and honest gambler. How far is Lou willing to carry on with this gig when it's obvious that he's the one who likes playing a rigged game? 3-1 for Gus. Funny how he likes questioning another man's integrity. But if one were to do a little digging past the charming smile in his bullshit act, it's interesting to see a little bit of illegal activity in Gus's business, and how it's connected to his shameful reputation in Vegas. Beads of sweat coming from his face. How long can this man go without caving in? It's all on the line now. Unfortunately for Gus, you can't bullshit death itself. 2-1 for our honest gambler. Is it not funny how this man, Lou Krebs, likes going around flaunting his success while questioning other men's integrity? A married man with 3 children. Kinda made Gus wonder if his wife knew about the other women. I mean, how can you blame Gus when he has to go home to something like that? It's bullshit, all of it. I mean, so far, the man still has his marriage. Still has something to go home to, and yet here he is. Selfish, stubborn bastard defending his image as an honest gambler by putting his own life on the line. It's even money now. That's a 50-50 chance for Gus. You know, it's said that when a bullet goes inside your head, a hot piece of metal that penetrates your skull and destroys the fleshy meat inside, a moment of shock when feeling the warm liquid coming down your head. It's literally the most painful experience before dying. But imagine if you lived through something like that. Your brain forever damaged, forever haunted by that ungodly sound that will shake your mind, The pain's so intense. You'll even have your days where you're begging for death. If Lou's lucky, Gus might live as a vegetable, and Lou will get to enjoy sharing a story of a cheat who ended up on life support, pissing and shitting through a tube. Well, I guess the odds are up for Lou. Either he forfeits and leaves town, or take a bullet into the brain. And Gus enjoying the situation. What was that he was saying about life after taking a gunshot to the head? And Lou placing the gun to his temple, shaking with nervousness. Okay. So what if Lou has a taste for the finest women? It's not like we're all perfect here. For God's sakes, it's Vegas. But a cheat? No, unlike Gus, Lou Krebs was always an honest gambler. He earned his damn name in Vegas. And there's no way he's gonna give up his honest reputation to a man like Gus Forney. No fucking way. No way that Lou is willing to give all that up to a cheat, even if it means taking a bullet to the head and wasting away as a vegetable. A dud? Or maybe somebody cheated in the hopes of the other guy caving in. Even in the game of Russian roulette, Gus would still find a way of using his expertise as a cheat. Or maybe Lou just could not accept the fact that Lady Luck is not really on his side, and would rather resort to pitiful accusations when not having his way. And that was when Gus decided to finally resolve this dispute with an unexpected challenge. Let's see how far these men are willing to go. How much they're willing to lose with a game of chop poker. And Lou agreeing to the challenge. That was when both men called their doctors. Chop poker, my friends. Literally the most enjoyable and exciting card game in the history of modern gambling. Think of it like strip poker, but instead of losing an article of clothing, you end up losing a limb. I think it's exciting how the majority of my audience prefers playing me in a game of chop poker instead of strip poker. Even though I'm terrible at strip poker, which I know some won't complain, I've yet found myself losing in a game of chop poker. But these two men, who are now sitting at a green felt covered table with a deck of cards and a gleaming meat cleaver, in a room with their own personal doctors on the side watching the preparation for an event that will not end well. And after the cards were dealt, you can definitely hear the excitement in Lou's voice when responding to Gus's 3 tens with his 3 ladies. And Lou grabbing the meat cleaver, the excitement on his face. Let's start with the fingers, yes? Obviously Gus reluctantly offering the pinky finger, Lou enjoying Gus's reaction when chopping off the little finger. You know, Gus, that's not true pain you're feeling. It's the shock in seeing your finger being chopped off. The pain, it'll come later, and it's not going to be lovely. After dealing the cards again, Lou's 2 pairs, kings and sixes, were no match against Gus's 3 fours. Gus is so going to enjoy this, watching this cheat squirm in pain. We're on a roll now, my friends. Gus seeing how far Lou's willing to go with this honest gambler bullshit. And Lou cutting the cards again and dealing them. After that game, another gambler losing a finger. And that's how it went all night, as each hand was played and won, and another body part was lost. And literally went on like this until the next day, up until neither Lou or Gus were able to deal the cards. And what was supposed to be an arrangement that should have resulted with Gus Forney and Lou Krebs resolving their situation with a winner, ended by default, meaning that there was no loser and no winner, and their reputations had turned into a popular horror story that's shared throughout Vegas. Even to this day, both men are still maintaining that competition against each other. And don't believe me? Well, if you decide to visit one of the local hospital shelters in Las Vegas, it's usually in the recreation room you'll find both Gus and Lou playing a game of checkers with their noses. And you know what else is funny? Sometimes the hospital staff will take bets as to which one of these men are going to win. Unfortunately, for those who are taking bets, Gus nor Lou had yet won nor lost the game, and I don't think they ever will. dating tips, marriage advice, how to get lucky with that girl or guy, non-consensual nudes, boxes of chocolates, a 12-step program for no pants dancing. You guys can do so much better than coming to me for these things. Oh, love. How that brief moment of flying in the clouds can turn into a strapping world of lingerie, chains, hooks, and torture screaming. And how our fantasy expectations can transform into an unremitting horror when we fail to acknowledge nor respect our needs. Yes, today's shameful lesson in love is about needs, and the madness that follows when they're not satisfied. You know, like when our bodies are hungry, we eat. When we feel tired, we go to sleep. And when we have urges to be touched, well, you know where I'm going with this. Yes, the urges, the drive, is practically human nature. Like every other animal on this planet, we too have a driven need to eat, sleep, and fuck. But for today's yarn of terror and lesson in love, we're going to see what happens when one is deprived from the feelings of being touched. A beautiful and stunning wife, married to a well-known doctor, a woman who has a mansion home, enough money to spoil herself with fine dining and expensive clothing, a life of luxury, and yet a woman whose happiness that will be soured when realizing that there is a void in her life. All her needs were satisfied and spoiled, with the exception of one. The beautiful woman you see before you, Janet Grover, married to the famous Dr. Abel Grover. What I love about Janet's tale is that her story shows that stories themselves don't need to follow in your rules. That stories don't have to abide by your expectations. But as with all stories that are brought to my show and presented for your sadistic pleasure, you can learn a thing or two. Or not. You could just pass off to slumberland with my narration, allowing me to do terrible things to you in your dreams. Janet Grover, a woman who has it all, except her husband's loving affection. Yes, even though Janet is aware of her husband's responsibilities as one of the most successful surgeons, and that the hospital holds a great deal of dependency on him and his expertise. A woman like Janet can get very lonely by herself. And we're not talking about her friends. We're talking about passion in its most physical and authentic form. And Janet saw none of that. Even on the rare evenings when there was no emergency calls, Janet's husband would rather putter below in his laboratory instead of enjoying his free evenings with his wife. Even though Janet tried supporting her husband's work, his responsibilities, ever since he began devoting his free time on this new anesthetic, Abel was completely oblivious to his wife's loneliness, that he was putting an immense strain on their marriage, assuming that his wealth was sufficient enough to satisfy Janet's happiness. Before marrying Abel, a man who Janet felt that could satisfy her selfish needs and requirements, Janet once believed that she had this power over men, her ways in using beauty to persuade and seduce men, until she married Abel. Not even the most exotic and fanciest lingerie with promises of wild passionate nights was not enough to shake Abel away from his work. Yes, having money and spoils was nice, but Janet was young, amazingly beautiful. She was a woman that needed to be loved, to be touched. Oh, those lonely nights, alone, neglected, ignored, growing more and more desperate. How the evenings would bring so much anguish. How Janet couldn't shake away this feeling that she was nothing more but an object to be displayed. Just an item that represented her husband's achievements. Janet, being a desperate woman, was now thinking of doing desperate things to fill this great void in her life. Which is why on one evening, when her neglectful husband was called for a frontal lobotomy, Janet decided to spend her evening at a fancy bar downtown to drown out the misery in her life. And that is how she came across Leon Payne, the answer to her desperate prayers. Much like Janet, Leon Payne was another lost traveler looking to fill a void in his life. Someone who was as equally desperate as she. And you can easily see how Janet and Leon immediately clinged on to each other, finding warmth within each other's arms within this dark, cold world. Insane. Yes, the whole affair was madly insane, and once Janet felt a man's touch, she could not resist the urges for more, and it could not be stopped. Can you stop an avalanche once it starts to thunder down the mountainside? Can you stop a waterfall from pouring steamily over a cliff? No. Nature was taking its course. Janet was so desperate, and yet so bold, that on evenings when Abel was downstairs working on his project, she easily convinced Leon to embrace their insane affair at her mansion home. Even though Leon didn't like the idea, Janet's beauty and his urges for her outweighed these concerns. He wanted to say no, but he couldn't. There was no way Leon could say no to a woman like Janet. You see, Janet had studied her husband's routine, that when he's finished working in the lab or is about to come up for food or something, he always turns off the lights, which can be seen over the garden wall outside, giving Leon an opportunity to leave unnoticed. And so, that's how the insane fair went. Dr. Abel Grover would be downstairs exploring the mysteries of medical science, while Leon and Janet would be upstairs, exploring the mysteries on each other. Now, I know in the back of Leon's mind, there's a little cricket in his head trying to tell him that this was a bad idea. Yeah, I think we can understand the loneliness, the drive, the need to be touched and all that. But Janet was so desperate and so spoiled. Leon just couldn't resist her charms. And even after a few more wild evenings of enjoying each other, I guess Leon should have listened to that little cricket in his head. You see, what happened was Dr. Grover was working on a new anesthetic that would revolutionize medical science. A man who was so invested in his work, his achievements, his success, oblivious to his wife's feelings or her needs, that once he achieved his goals of creating a new anesthetic, immediately he rushed up the stairs to tell his wife the amazing news, forgetting to turn off the lights. And that is how Dr. Abel Grover happened upon his wife's secret affair. Poor Dr. Grover, that moment of happiness quickly turning into anguish when overhearing the passion within the other room. All that success, those achievements, only to find himself happening upon the results of his selfishness and neglect. The results of his failure. But no, he never failed his wife. He spoiled her, gave her everything she wanted. How could she do this? But what should he do? Divorce her? Free her? Leave her? No, that would be too easy. And these grieving feelings slowly being washed away with a sinister calmness, Dr. Grover knew exactly what to do when looking at the lab animals. The results of his miraculous surgery and anesthetic. He'll hurt her, just like she hurt him. Now, if you think this whole thing is insane, oh my friends, things are about to get more interesting when Dr. Grover's madness becomes an addition to this story. After telling his wife that he was going to be gone for almost a week, a meeting in New York over the new anesthetic, how his plan went like clockwork when seeing Leon coming to his home an hour later, being greeted by his wife. Janet, so spoiled, so desperate, so predictable when seeing these two lovebirds embrace each other in his house while remaining in the laboratory. And as these two lovers sat on the couch, tasting their first sweet, tantalizing moments of their thirst, that was when Dr. Grover got to see the fast and effective results of his anesthetic. Patience Pratt. Nobody's attempted a double bypass brain transplant before. First on animals, and now humans. But due to the situation, I guess we can say it's the same thing. You must admire a surgeon's craft, his work of art in controlling flesh and blood. The skills required to make miracles or create unremitting horrors. Dr. Grover's hands working like delicate machines upon flesh, cutting, slicing, and stitching. If I'm not mistaken, I think these brief moments of playing God may be doing something to Dr. Grover's unhinged mind. And when his work was finally complete, Dr. Grover saw nothing but beauty, not in his wife, nor her lover, but his masterpiece. By now, a unique madness had already formed within Dr. Grover when shedding a tear of happiness for his latest success, his dreams of medical science turning into a medical nightmare, for there was dreams of creating other beauties blossoming in his mind, and carefully placing Janet and Leon back on the couch, hiding from a distance and waiting for these two lovers to wake from their peaceful slumber, completely unaware of the events, nor that a week had already passed. Dr. Grover watched silently as both Janet and Leon woke from their sleep, smiled, looked at each other, apologized as they reached out to be in each other's arms, only to find that their romantic bliss suddenly interrupted by shock and disgust. Well, seeing how Janet and Leon had completely lost their heads for each other, the good doctor made sure of it by surgically removing their heads, switching them, then placing them on each other's bodies. Now I know that there's much to say with this story, thus how it all could have been prevented, or who was at fault for this bizarre outcome. What I wonder is if it would be the same blissful experience if Janet and Leon were to pleasure themselves. Now try wrapping your head around that one. As for the good Dr. Abel, well, I don't think he took the heartbreak too seriously. I think the whole affair was just a push he needed to explore different areas of medical science. Following the events, turns out the doctor's respectful career had taken a darker path when he began using his craft on other people, willingly and unwillingly. It was just a matter of time before Dr. Abel's genius resulted with him being confined within the deepest, darkest bowels of a sanitarium. As for Janet and Leon, I don't know what became of them, but at least we know they still have each other if they ever start feeling lonely and desperate again.
Hello, my friends. You crazy psychopaths looking for more sadistic horror to quench that thirst. You know, if you keep coming here for means of entertainment, I'm afraid you might find yourself being institutionalized, begging for some electroshock therapy or lobotomy. I think sometime in the future on Patreon I may offer that kind of service for a decent price. A little sloppy, but hey, definitely worth the happy thoughts once I remove certain parts of your brain tissue. Just enough happy thoughts to make you believe that you can fly. Even when you're falling to your death, you'll still have that Peter Pan experience. Today, my friends, I'm about to bless you with a horror that is far worse than any ghosts, monsters, nor Slender Man lurking in the woods. A nightmare that has ruined so many lives, giving a miserable death after years of agonizing torture and suffering. Number 1 on any top 10 horror video that you would see trending on YouTube. A horror that will make any creepy pasta look like a dull nursery rhyme. Marriage. And I know there's a decent number of members of my audience who heavily agree with me when I say that Marriage offers the greatest horror stories, such as the horror story that this troubled-looking man has to share within today's tale of terror. Introduction: Erwin Smith, a friendly and kind-hearted gentleman, but has an uneasy look about him. Not sure if it's the rain nor his determination to avoid the heavy storm outside when returning the tools that he borrowed from his neighbor Bert. Bert had known Erwin and his wife Hannah for quite some time, which is why he immediately noticed Erwin's strange behavior when returning the tools, and this determination to have Bert come over and see what he's been working on for the past couple days. But with the rainstorm outside, at first Bert felt it would be best to wait till tomorrow before coming over. But seeing how Erwin looked troubled, Bert changed his mind and decided to wait until later, until the storm calms down, inviting Erwin to come inside, warm up a bit, and relax, have some coffee, and share what's on his mind. Obviously there was something wrong with Erwin. His nervousness, the tears streaming down his face. Something had definitely happened between him and Hannah, and Erwin slowly easing his nervousness, calming down and relaxing in a chair. That was when Erwin shared his story and began talking about his wife Hannah, the Hannah that nobody knew. When Erwin first met Hannah, she was thin, shy, and very kind, and even though she wasn't what you would call the most beautiful woman in the world, neither was Erwin the most handsome. Either way, Erwin had truly loved Hannah for the woman that she is, and will never forget their wedding day. Unfortunately, Erwin didn't have a lot of money to go on, just enough for a 3-day honeymoon vacation to Atlantic City and the first month's rent for their new house in a nice suburban neighborhood. And yes, even though money was very tight with what Erwin was making, it was just enough to live off on. And that's what it looked like for these two, a loving couple living out their days in happiness, if Erwin and Hannah were to make careful and smart choices on their spending. And all was fine, until one day Hannah came home with a box of Whitman samplers. That was when it all began, the beginning of an unremitting horror. Whitman samplers is a box that consists of chocolates, each one with a different flavor, very popular and overpriced for a box of candy. And even though Erwin wanted the best for Hannah, seeing the joy on her face when coming home with another box of Whitman samplers, Hannah's spending advice was making Erwin terribly nervous. Seeing her buy 2 boxes a week, they can't afford making decisions like that. And even though Erwin had tried reasoning with Hannah over her reckless spending or convince her to find a snack that was more affordable, the more Erwin objected to Hannah's behavior, the more she kept buying these Whitman boxes, and the more she kept devouring these chocolates, oblivious to the weight that she was gaining. It had even gotten so bad that Erwin was unable to buy new socks, forced to wear socks that were torn and had holes because of how all the spending money went to those Whitman samplers. And maybe it was all Erwin's fault how Hannah got like this. That maybe this candy was a substitute for a craving of hers that her husband couldn't satisfy. And it had only gotten worse when Hannah began using money that was for necessities to buy more Whitman samplers. This time, it was now 3 boxes a week. The day when Bert first moved into the neighborhood, meeting Erwin and Hannah for the first time, it was sad to see how Bert was oblivious to the struggles within Erwin's marriage. That past the Hallmark image was a man struggling with his wife's unending appetite for these disgusting chocolates, completely careless over the weight she was gaining in her selfish behavior. If Bert were to look past Erwin's mournful greeting, he would see a man struggling to get through the day with shirts with frayed collars, worn-out shoes, ties that wouldn't tie, and a torn jacket that won't be enough for this coming winter. Even when trying to reason with Hannah on getting a new jacket was no success. Not the loving Hannah Erwin once knew. Instead, she was a callous woman who only cared about her own needs. She only agreed to this allowance thing just to keep her husband off her back, and could care less if Erwin decides to spend his allowance, which isn't as much as Hannah's, on care fare and lunches, just as long as she has her Whitman boxes. She could care less about her husband's problems. If he needs clothes so bad, then maybe he should start thinking about taking smaller lunches before winter comes. It's sad how it got into this. Erwin isn't what you would call a confrontational man. Because of his love for Hannah, he tried tolerating this behavior. But one day, it was too much for Erwin. You see, for the past couple weeks, Erwin had gotten a raise and never told his wife about it, and began hiding a portion of the money he would get every week from Hannah. And when he saved enough money to buy a jacket and some new clothes, somehow Hannah had found that money and went out and spent it all on 4 5-pound boxes of Whitman samplers. And coming home and seeing his wife, Hannah, filling her face with those disgusting chocolates, spent all that money on boxes of Whitman samplers, and could care less about her husband and his needs. So what if she spent all his money? He'll get over it. Erwin doesn't remember what happened after she said that. Seeing the chocolate stains on the corners of her mouth, the bits of coconut wedged between her teeth, it was like Erwin was seeing red, his heart racing, heat running through him as the scent of various flavors lingered in the air, coming from that hideous face as Hannah talked about her love for these Whitman sweets. A burning rage that ran from his mind to his hands. Erwin was overtaken by an inner hatred for his wife, an intense desire to solve this problem. Well, Erwin needed to borrow some tools from Bert. There was something he had to do. He made something, and Bert just noticing the blood on Erin's shirt. And seeing how the rain had just stopped, now should be a good time for Bert to come over and see what Erin had been working on. Well, I think Erin may have given his wife more than her fill of sweets. Oh, how she loved these Whitman boxes. And even though Bert may not agree with Erin's methods of resolving their marriage problems, you see, Erin loves Hannah so much. And sometimes it's best to go to the extreme when resolving certain issues. Willing to go so far by having her become a variety of tasty treats for a Whitman box of his own design. Much like Erin's response when Hannah first showed him these chocolates. Bert gagged at the sight of the variety of gory contents within the giant oversized wooden box, offering Bert to try one of these tasty treats. Much like the insides of a Whitman box, there was also a diagram showing the different flavors of Hannah. Brain and eyeball mix, chopped nut, sour bowels, or how about some Tootsies? You know, my friends, I think Erin may be onto something when it comes to finding that special someone a gift for Christmas. And seeing how Erin here is wasting his miserable life in some padded room, picking the buttons off the wall and popping them in his mouth, with each one screaming caramel. I think Erin wouldn't mind if I steal his idea with my own brand of sweets that I would love to share with my fellow supporters on Patreon. Maybe a special gift after going through that lobotomy service that I'm thinking about doing. Enjoying Christmas with those happy thoughts as they stuffed their face with that sweet taste of flesh. I meant caramel, after doing a little rewiring in the brain. Anyways, my friends, please make sure you keep an eye out on my Twitter and Instagram at Horror Show Comics, just in case you might come across something special that you don't want to miss out on. Until next time, thank you for watching the show, The Horror Show.